The Muggle Death Eater and His Daughter by Great 78. Chapter 36. Orthodontics and Obfuscations. After the force of Snape's spell hit him, Dumbledore flew up into the air, trusting completely in his comrades. After only a second or two of falling, his velocity slowed considerably, and in a moment it felt as though he had landed on a pillow of air. "Are you all right?" The searching blue eyes of Remus Lupin loomed over him. "I'm fine. Well, as good as to be expected. A bit tired from before. Harry and I had to... It was very difficult." Dumbledore could hear the rambling weakness in his own voice. "I'm going to help you up. We have to hurry," Remus said urgently. "Sirius, are you ready?" From next to Remus, an exact copy of Dumbledore swam into sight. "Yes, go ahead and stun me." Remus helped Dumbledore up, and Sirius laid down in his place, arranging his limbs, just so. "Stupefy," Remus said forcefully, pointing his wand at the wizard on the ground. "Remus, what's taking so long?" Tonks's voice called, quiet but urgent, only a short distance away. "The professor is weak. We're going to have to work together to get him to the Shrieking Shack, to disapparate," Remus said urgently. "You may need to take him directly to St. Mungo's." "No, that will ruin everything. I must stay out of public sight, Remus, you know that," wheezed Dumbledore. "But you need a doctor, Albus." Dumbledore looked at Tonks. "I believe you know of someone, Nymphadora." She nodded quickly. "Remus, stay here with Sirius like we planned. He will need some help, especially once the body is found," Tonks said urgently. Already the doors of the castle were opening, and curious students who had noticed the green flash of light and the green dark mark in the sky were spilling into the grounds. Tonks disillusioned herself and Dumbledore, making their way to the Whomping Willow. She levitated the weakened headmaster through the tunnel carefully, emerging after only a bit of difficulty in the Shrieking Shack. Professor McGonagall hurried up the stairs to the astronomy tower. "Venite incantatem!" "Professor, it was Snape, and Hermione, and Draco, they—" Harry was yanking off the invisibility cloak and gathering up his wand and that of Dumbledore's. "They killed—" And a bubble of emotion tore through Harry's throat. He struggled to push past his head of house, eager to go after them, to exact punishment. "Potter! Potter, it's all right!" "It's not, Professor. They killed him. They—" "Potter, quit struggling. You may be stronger than me, but believe me, I know more spells than you," McGonagall said irritably. "Professor Snape, Mr. Malfoy, and Miss Granger are gone." Harry fell back down onto the ground in shock. "Hermione, her father, Draco, we trusted them. And Snape! Professor, Severus Snape was never on our side. He's the one that performed the Avada—" "I know, Harry. I'm so sorry you had to witness it," Professor McGonagall said, and she meant it. "I'll have someone get you to the infirmary for a sleeping draught." "You don't know! Professor, I'm fine. I just need to go after—" "No, you don't, Potter," she said sternly. "You only need to calm your mind. Practice your occlumency." He stared, wide-eyed at her for a moment, then dropped his head in his hands. "This is all so fucked," he moaned. His body slumped back against the wall as his legs gave out, and he slid down the wall gracelessly. "Language, Potter." McGonagall settled beside him, withdrawing a biscuit tin from her pocket. The outside of the tin had been heavily dented by one of the near-miss spells fired at her. "But yes, your assessment is correct. Gingenute." Harry fumbled inside the tin and withdrew a small stack of the biscuits. "Creature!" Tonks called as soon as she and Dumbledore crossed the threshold of 12 Grimmauld Place. The elf popped in front of her with a beady-eyed look. "I need for you to make up a bed here on the ground floor. In the living room, quickly!" The elf nodded silently and popped away. Next, Tonks took out her mobile phone and pressed a few buttons. As the other end of the call rang, she chivied Dumbledore to the newly made-up bed in the living room. "Hi, it's Dora. I need your help. Get your medical bag. I'll be there in 1 minute." She hung up swiftly. "Your mother?" Dumbledore asked through laboured breaths. "No, she and Dad are in Canada on holiday, but I have someone else that can help. I'll be right back." Tonks hurried to the front stoop and spun on the spot. Professors Vector and Sprout kept everyone at bay, while Flitwick conjured a blanket to cover Sirius's polyjuiced body. "Have you seen Minerva?" Lupin asked Pomona Sprout, but she just shook her head sorrowfully. In the haze of shock and grief, no one thought to question why Lupin was there. "Make way, please, make way!" came the no-nonsense voice of Professor McGonagall from behind him. Gratefully, Remus rushed to her, offering her the hug of a fellow griever, so that they could talk without being overheard. "It's been 25 minutes or so. The polyjuice is good for a while, but he may stir at any moment from the stunning spell. I don't dare stun him again in front of all these people." They had originally wanted to use the draught of living death, but Snape thought that it might not mix well with some of the ingredients from polyjuice. Professor McGonagall spotted Hagrid in the crowd, sobbing uncontrollably. "Oh, Hagrid, can you carry Professor Dumbledore's body inside? The room just off the Great Hall," she instructed. Hagrid sobbed and blew his nose into a tablecloth-sized handkerchief, but he nodded and dutifully gathered the covered body to bring inside. Remus and Minerva followed, watching worriedly as Hagrid settled the body on a low divan. "Hagrid, would you mind looking in on the Gryffindors? Get everyone back to their common rooms if you can. Then ask the other heads of house to meet us in the headmaster's office in 1 hour. Professor Slughorn can stand in for Snape." Hagrid nodded tearfully and lumbered out. "Harry was rather upset. I feel miserable not being able to tell him. But if he appears unaffected at the funeral—" Professor McGonagall began. Remus nodded sympathetically. On the low sofa in front of the fireplace, Sirius roused slowly. "Did it work? Are they gone?" Remus turned to his old friend. "Yes, it's done. Tonks has Albus, and the Death Eaters left without incident." "Right, perfect. Minerva, you're going up to meet the heads of house soon?" "Yes, I will push for the funeral to be held in 2 days, without public viewing. It's the earliest I think we can have it. There may be a few, however, who will insist upon seeing the body, Sirius. You should have plenty of polyjuice, yes? Remus, will you stay with him tonight to keep vigil?" Remus nodded. "All right. Ward the doors after I leave. I shall check on you both in the morning. Dumbledore's painting won't have appeared on the wall in the headmaster's office, as he's not actually dead, so I'll need to remedy that now. Luckily, most newly deceased paintings' subjects sleep for a few weeks, so perhaps no one will think it odd when it doesn't speak yet." "I imagine it will be one of the least odd things about tonight," Sirius said sadly. His skin began to bubble as his transformation back to his normal appearance began. McGonagall pushed back her hair from where it had begun to fall from her bun. "I believe the phrase Potter used earlier tonight sums this up all too well. This is all so fucked." "Agreed," murmured Remus. The 10 of them crowded into the small, darkened shop in Nocturne Alley, trying not to bump into the dark artifacts on display. Severus Snape raised his wand to heal the gash on Gibbon's leg. "Roll, Gibbon. Both of you performed well. Amicus, Electo, Greyback. You all as well. You may all return directly to your homes." "What about my mouth?" Greyback said angrily, bloody foam flying from his lips. "Stupid bitch got me in the teeth!" He dropped his thickly finger-nailed hand to show the damage to his jaw and teeth. "Ah, that's enamel cruelty, that is," Richard Granger said with an appraising way, assessing the werewolf's teeth. Greyback made as though to lunge at him furiously, but Snape's rapid shield charm forced him backwards. "Hold still. I can fix that. And for the record," he said, "enamel, as in teeth." With the jagged teeth restored, and his jaw healed, Greyback moved to follow the other four where they had disappeared into the flue, but not before giving one final growling menace in the direction of Richard Granger. Once they had gone, Snape looked menacingly at Richard. "The next time you wish to make an asinine joke towards a werewolf, I shall let him bite you." "Well, thanks for your help tonight," Richard said, offering his hand for Snape to shake. Snape inhaled slowly and exhaled even slower. Bellatrix watched the entire interaction with bored fascination. "You two seem to know each other fairly well, considering that you only met tonight." "Oh, no. I know Severus from years before. We've had missions together in the past," Richard offered. "Really? Which ones?" Bellatrix asked eagerly. "Bella, you know that the Dark Lord swears his followers to secrecy concerning missions. I should not need to remind you of that," Snape said bitingly. She sneered at him in answer, then took a pinch of flue powder and tossed it into the grate. "Malfoy Manor!" Now that it was only the four of them, Draco turned quickly to Snape. "Do you know if Dumbledore—" But at the professor's panicked look, he stopped. "Mr. Malfoy, as you and Miss Granger are still under age to apparate, I shall accompany you both to your homes. Shall we take the Grangers first?" Snape asked pointedly. While this was untrue, as both Draco and Hermione were already 17, Draco realized his mistake quickly. Borgin was watching the group from the shadows. "Of course, Professor." "Sorry if this hurts a bit. I'm sure there's a spell or something that does this more easily, but I'm afraid that even if I knew what it was, it would be of no use to me," Linda said ruefully to Albus Dumbledore, as she checked his blood sugar levels. "Nonsense. On the contrary, I often find the Muggle way of doing things to be quite thorough," Dumbledore said through pale but smiling lips. "Your blood sugar's a little low, but nothing that a few sweets won't solve," Linda said, checking the readout from the blood sugar monitor. Dumbledore waved a hand and wordlessly conjured a handful of lemon sherbets. "Want one?" "No, thanks," Linda said with a smile. "Now, with this fever and your swollen glands and tongue, it seems you're either having an allergic reaction of some sort, or a kind of immune response. Did you ingest anything out of the ordinary today?" "I did, in fact. It was an unknown potion, very potent." Linda frowned. "I generally recommend against people going around drinking unknown potions," she admonished. "A fair point," agreed Dumbledore, "although, in my defense, it was a necessary evil." Well, to be safe, perhaps an antihistamine and a corticosteroid. I don't wish to be alarmist, but at your age I would prefer to be more safe than sorry." She withdrew the medication from her bag, measuring out doses and shaking out the tablets, and filling a fresh glass of water with the silver pitcher from the table. "Just do me a favour. Don't go trying that new fixer elixir I've been seeing adverts for. It looks a bit dodgy." "I quite agree. It does seem dodgy," said Dumbledore, returning her smile and dutifully taking the medication that she offered. They were interrupted by a rush of light that swept into the room. It formed itself into the shape of a beautiful, dazzling silver deer. "We are all safe," the deer said, in a steady, deep voice, at odds with the delicate doe's features. "Excellent," Dumbledore said without explanation, raising his own wand to conjure a ball of silver light himself. "I am pleased to hear it. I am safe as well." Dumbledore turned back to the confused Linda Granger. "And now that you have provided such a kind service to me, Dr. Granger, I feel it only right to tell you a bit about what happened tonight, as it concerns you as well." "What do you mean?" Linda asked, confused. "Last summer, your daughter and her friend Draco were asked by Lord Voldemort to carry out the most heinous and unforgivable of crimes. To put it simply, they were instructed to murder me," Dumbledore said. In Linda's shock, she nearly slipped off the edge of the sofa. "What? How?" "Do not fear. As you can tell, they did not, in fact, carry out the deed. Rather, they called upon maturity beyond their years, and came to me for help instead. Together with a handful of others, including Nymphadora here, Draco and Hermione and I brought off quite an elaborate plan that guarantees the children's safety. You see, we have faked my death, so that it appears to Lord Voldemort that they have been successful. He will not punish them." As Dumbledore spoke, quick tears sprang to Linda's eyes. This, then, had been the thing Voldemort had discussed with them at the reception last year. Her heart broke for her daughter and Draco, knowing that they'd had to live with this burden weighing on them for months. "To that end, I must ask a favour of you," Dumbledore continued. "Anything?" Linda whispered. "When you see Hermione and Draco, please do not mention our encounter here tonight. Neither of them asked for this assignment from Lord Voldemort. If they wish to tell you about this, please don't offer them judgment." After a moment, Linda nodded. "Only if you will do the same for me." Dumbledore looked at her, prompting her to go on. "If Hermione or Richard knew that I was involving myself in anything like this, they would be distraught. Hermione would never forgive herself for bringing me into this situation, even though it was my decision to get involved." "I understand," Dumbledore said a bit sorrowfully. "We do a great many things to protect the ones we love. We only have to hope that it is enough." Draco and Hermione were followed by Richard and Snape through the flue into the Granger living room. Without a word, the young witch and wizard fell into each other's arms, the emotions of the evening catching up with them both. Draco turned to Snape. "Do we know if Dumbledore is safe?" Without a word, Snape raised his wand and conjured a Patronus, simply saying to it, "We are all safe." Richard, who looked equally relieved as the others that they were back in familiar territory, chuckled shakily. "That's pretty handy. It saves a lot on mobile charges, I suppose." Snape did not answer. After a moment, another ball of light, this one shaped like a large bird, flew through the wall of the living room and spoke in Dumbledore's voice. "I am pleased to hear it. I am safe as well." "Ah, geez! How neat is that? His light thing looks just like his pet bird," Richard said in wonder. "Witches and wizards often have animals unique to them for their Patronus," Hermione explained. Richard nodded thoughtfully. "Well, that's just great. Gee, I wonder what mine would be." "A horsefly," Snape answered with no hesitation. "Okie dokie," Richard said with a little smile. Snape stared flintily at the two teenagers before speaking. "I must impress upon the two of you to speak to no one about this. The Dark Lord will summon the two of you when he deems fit. It likely will be soon." Draco turned to Hermione. "I'll see you soon, yeah?" She nodded, placing a slow kiss on his cheek. "We must go, Draco. I'm not certain where Mrs. Granger is, but it is best if we are gone when she returns," Snape said. Draco took a deep breath and gave Hermione a final hug, then shook Richard's hand in parting. 10 minutes later, the front door opened and Linda Granger stepped inside, her medical bag concealed inside of her rolled yoga mat. "Mum!" Hermione flew at her mother, throwing her arms around her. Linda did not miss the red puffiness of her daughter's features, but she chose to ignore it. "Hermione, darling, what a surprise! We didn't expect you home for a few more days. Did you not take the train?" No. Term ended. It ended a bit sooner than expected, and rather than waiting around for the train, I asked to come home early," Hermione supplied. Linda decided that she could ignore her daughter's tearful eyes no longer. "Is everything all right, love?" "Yes," Hermione answered. "At least for tonight." Thank you for listening to this chapter of The Muggle Death Eater by Great78.